UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is trying to steady his government after one of the toughest moments of his leadership. Following days of pressure over Peter Mandelsohn's involvement in Epstein files, Starmer has survived calls to step down, thanks to backing from his cabinet and senior Labour figures. The question now is not whether he stays, but how he resets his leadership at this critical point. As we dive into the details, this and more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Thabita Arko. Let's begin. Welcome back. Right before we get into the details, let's take a look at this video of Scottish leader calling for Keir Starmer's resignation. Watch.
I have, as you can imagine, done a lot of thinking over the last few days, and I am clear that I have to do what's right for my country, Scotland. This isn't easy, and it's not without pain, as I have a genuine friendship with Keir Starmer. But my first priority and my first loyalty is to my country, Scotland. And I am not willing to sacrifice Scotland's NHS, our schools, our communities, our towns, cities, villages and islands to a third decade of an SNP government. That's why the distraction needs to end and the leadership in Downing Street has to change. It is so obvious that we desperately need change in Scotland. And in 3 months' time, the opportunity to get rid of a failing SNP government is one that is too important to be missed. We cannot allow the failures at the heart of Downing Street to mean the failures continue here in Scotland.
Meanwhile, amidst the call, he continues to appeal to keep his job. Prime Minister Keir Starmer chaired his weekly cabinet meeting on Tuesday after surviving internal pressure to resign following controversy over his appointment of Peter Mandelsohn as the UK's ambassador to the United States. Starmer's position stabilized after senior ministers publicly backed him, blunting calls from Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawara for him to step aside. The show of support followed a tense meeting with Labour MPs held amid growing criticism of the government's handling of the Mandelsohn appointment. Addressing the Parliamentary Labour Party, Starmer confirmed he would remain in office and pledged changes to the operation of Downing Street. He went ahead to outline how he intends to reset his leadership. He said the reforms would go beyond staff reshuffles and would address concerns about communication and inclusivity within the party. Starmer acknowledged that relations with Labour MPs had not been sufficiently open and warned that internal divisions risked weakening the government's ability to govern effectively. He accepted responsibility for the decision to appoint Mandelsohn, describing it as a mistake, and said he understood why it had caused unease within the party. The Prime Minister also paid tribute to his former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who left Downing Street on Monday, crediting him for his service during Labour's transition into government. Now, this is Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff who has resigned due to the scandal. But then the Prime Minister is still in office, keeping up with his job. In a firm defense of his leadership, Starmer told MPs he would not resign, arguing that stepping aside would undermine the government's mandate and create instability. He pointed to Labour's recent landslide election victory as evidence of the party's renewed strength under his leadership. Starmer also highlighted the composition of his cabinet, describing it as the most working class in British history, and urged Labour MPs to focus their political efforts on countering the rise of Reform UK, which he identified as a major electoral challenge. Now, following the meeting, Starmer left Parliament as his government moved to contain fallout from the controversy and refocus on its legislative agenda. This is a development coming from the Epstein file, and we'll be moving further over to what is happening right here and what has just happened in Australia, and this is due to the Australian-Israeli tension. Australian leaders on Tuesday appealed for calm and urged peaceful protests after violent clashes erupted in central Sydney during demonstrations against the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Police said 27 people were arrested following the unrest on Monday evening, including 10 individuals accused of assaulting officers. The clashes broke out when police moved to disperse thousands of protesters who had gathered near Sydney's town hall. Several demonstrators, including a state opposition lawmaker, alleged they were assaulted by police during the operation. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he was deeply troubled by the violence and called on Australians to express their views without resorting to confrontation. He stressed that while many people want the violence in the Middle East to end, they do not want conflict piling onto Australian streets. He added that violence seems to undermine rather than advance political causes. Meanwhile, New South Wales police said there were no reports of serious injuries. Let's take a look.
We need to turn the temperature down, and the Greens political party need to be a part of turning that temperature down rather than up. Australians want the killing to stop. They want innocent lives to be protected, whether they be Israeli or Palestinian. And the other thing that they want is for conflict to not be brought here. There is a need in this country as well as globally for some nuance in this debate, and that the debate is not advanced by people thinking it's like a football team where you have to support 100% one side or the other. That does not advance peace.
Of course, the temperature needs to be toned down. Now we see that the protests coincided with President Herzog's visit and followed a deadly mass shooting at a Jewish religious event at Bondi Beach in December that left 15 people dead. President Herzog spoke about the shooting, and he gave an extensive view about what is happening currently with the whole situation of anti-Semitism. Let's watch.
And I could not but think about families who I met after October 7th. And the truth of the matter is it's the same type of enemy. It's the jihadist ideology that wants to eradicate all of those who are not extreme Muslims, meaning moderate Muslims, Christians of all denominations, and Jews. It's known, it's written in the annals of the jihadist philosophy and ideology, and the world has to wake up and understand this is a very dangerous plague, and this is something that threatens the most inherent values of the free world.
That was an exclusive interview with Sky News. Ahead of the rally, police were authorized to use rarely invoked powers, including directing crowds to move on, restricting access to certain areas, and conducting vehicle searches. A legal challenge to those measures was dismissed by a Sydney court on Monday. Herzog was not present at the protest location. Television footage showed protesters attempting to push through police blockades while officers forced the crowd back. Some demonstrators were seen on the ground as police restrained them. Authorities confirmed that tear gas and pepper spray were used to disperse the crowd. Let's take a look. Let's watch the situation on ground.
Now I'm just going to say one thing. This isn't me saying...
Meanwhile, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns defended the police response, saying officers were forced to make rapid decisions in highly volatile circumstances and had acted appropriately. In contrast, the Palestinian Action Group Sydney accused police of surrounding protesters and preventing them from leaving before charging into the crowd, using mounted officers, pepper spray, and physical force. Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon said officers had acted with restraint, arguing that the situation involved an aggressive crowd moving toward police lines and required decisive action to restore order. Meanwhile, Josh Lees, head of Palestine Action Group Sydney, said supporters planned to rally outside police headquarters on Tuesday evening in response to the clashes. Now, moving ahead and bringing you to the Epstein file and the whole scandal around that, especially in the palace. But Buckingham Palace has said on Monday it would cooperate with any police investigation into Prince Andrew after newly released documents suggested he may have shared confidential British trade information with the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. The development follows the publication of millions of U.S. court records linked to Epstein, a convicted sex offender who died in 2019. The document included emails indicating that Andrew, also known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, forwarded official trade report to Epstein in 2010 while serving as a UK trade envoy. Trade envoys are prohibited from sharing sensitive or commercially restricted government documents. The record suggests Epstein's received reports on countries including Vietnam and Singapore that Andrew had obtained in connection with official travel. Thames Valley Police said the matter had been referred to them and that they were assessing whether a formal investigation should be opened. Buckingham Palace said the king had expressed concern about allegations that continue to emerge regarding his brother's conduct. The palace said the claims were for Andrew to address, but added it would support police if approached, and reiterated that the royal family sympathizes remain with victims of abuse. Now, there's a video going on right on social media with King Charles being hecked at. Let's watch.
Charles, how long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you been protecting Andrew from prosecution?
Meanwhile, Andrew has denied wrongdoing and has not responded to requests for comment since the release of the latest document. Prince William and his wife Kate said they were concerned by the ongoing Epstein revelations and reiterated that their focus remained on victims. Andrew withdrew from public royal duties in 2019 following criticism over his links to Epstein. In October, King Charles removed his remaining royal title, and last week, Andrew was asked to leave his residence on the royal estate. Now, in 2022, Andrew settled a civil lawsuit brought by Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexually abusing her when she was a teenager through Epstein. Meanwhile, Andrew denied. He denied the allegations. And so sadly, Giuffre died in April 2025. So now police are also reviewing a separate allegation raised in the newly released files involving a woman being taken to a property near Windsor where Andrew has lived. Now these are more and even enough of the pictures we are seeing with the scandal surrounding Andrew. And this is coming right here in the palace. This is coming right here with royalty. Quite a lot of questions to think about that. Now, moving away from that and coming over to Bangladesh. Bangladesh votes in its first national election since a youth-led uprising toppled longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, raising hopes of political renewal even as veteran political forces dominate the space. Hasina fled the country in August 2024 after weeks of mass protests driven largely by young Bangladeshis angered by corruption and nepotism and disputed elections. Images of protesters storming her official residence and her departure by helicopter reverberated globally, inspiring youth movement elsewhere in South Asia and also in Africa. Now, the youths were not giving way. Let's watch. 15-year rule ended amid allegations of electoral manipulation, widespread corruption, and the violent suppression of dissent. The United Nations estimates that about 1,400 people were killed during the government's crackdown on demonstrators. Despite the pivotal role played by students and young activists in Hasina's downfall, the leading contenders in Thursday's vote came from Bangladesh's entrenched political establishment. The front-runner is Tariq Rahman, leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and son of former Prime Minister Khalida Zia. Rahman recently returned from 17 years in exile and has benefited from the ban placed on Hasina's Awami League, which is barred from contesting the election. Also resurging is Jamaat-e-Islami, the country's largest Islamist party, which had been heavily restricted under Hasina's government. The party has drawn criticism for fielding no female candidates in the election. The protest that led to Hasina's ouster began over civil service job quotas and rapidly escalated after a violent government response. When the military declined to intervene against demonstrators, her position collapsed. She fled to India, where she remains in exile. In November 2024, a Dhaka court sentenced Hasina to death in absentia for crimes against humanity linked to the unrest. Bangladesh has since sought her extradition, a request India has not acted upon, straining relations between the two countries. The political vacuum right here created by Hasina's exit briefly raised expectations that a new generation of leaders would reshape Bangladesh's political landscape. However, the National Citizen Party, formed by student leaders after the uprising, has struggled to gain traction. In December, the NCP announced a controversial alliance with Jamaat-e-Islami, a move widely seen as a bid for political survival in Bangladesh's volatile and often violent political environment. Analysts say parliamentary representation can offer protection in a system where opposition figures are frequently targeted. The alliance has disappointed many former protesters, particularly women and minority activists who view it as a retreat from the movement's original demands for inclusion and reform. Meanwhile, the interim government led by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus has faced mounting criticism over its failure to stem political violence and attacks on candidates and religious minorities ahead of the vote. Elections officials described Thursday's poll as the most competitive and credible in more than a decade, fueling cautious optimism among voters in Dhaka and beyond. Now, for many young Bangladeshis, the election represents a test of whether the sacrifices of the uprising will translate into lasting political change or whether power will simply return to familiar hands. Until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Remember, we'll bring you Untold Stories and Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.